The Department of English at Missouri State University presents Let's Read the Tragical History of Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. Christopher Marlowe, known as Kip to his friends, was the first superstar playwright of the Elizabethan theater. Some of Shakespeare's earlier plays, including Henry VI, Part 1 through 3, were written in cooperation with Marlowe. Marlowe put in some of the big speeches because Marlowe was good at speeches. Marlowe, I think the critic Dryden referred to Marlowe's mighty line. He had this real gift for the high style, for what you might call grandiloquence. Is this the face that launched 1,000 ships? He was really good at the iambic pentameter, and he wrote tragedies, like tragedies about violent, marginal outsiders who achieved power through nefarious reasons. One about the conqueror Tamerlane. One was a play called The Jew of Malta, an anti-Semitic document that makes The Merchant of Venice look like Yentl, frankly. And also, perhaps his most famous play, The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus, which is based on an urban legend of the 16th century about a scholar who gives up a conventional means of seeking knowledge in order to pursue magic and sells his soul to the devil. This is a world. Marlowe is writing for an audience that where belief in magic and spiritual warfare is mainstream. It's not. These things still exist, but they are more or less subcultural now. These beliefs are communicated within specific communities and not more widely shared in our American society. This is not true in late 16th century England. The belief in magic, in ghosts, in devils are real. Some people believe that Marlowe wrote the character of Faustus based in part, or because of popular fascination, with a guy named John Dee, D-E-E, who wrote works on magic and the Kabbalah, and who was Elizabeth I's personal court astrologer. He also helped redesign the British Navy, and he was an engineer, a scholar, an astronomer, and also a sorcerer. He was, his house was burnt down and he was kicked out of England by an angry mob, and he fled to the Czech Republic, what was then called Bohemia. He came back eventually, but there were other people around who, he returns to England in 1595, a few years after the writing of Faustus, and in fact the death of Christopher Marlowe at the age of 29. Supposedly in a bar fight. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about. I don't know if they're conspiracy theories. It's a very dodgy thing because there's some evidence that suggests that Christopher Marlowe was a kind of intelligence agent. He was somebody who was secretly suspected to be either Catholic or an atheist, and yet he worked for basically the secret religious police of Elizabeth I. In the context of the 16th century and the struggle between Catholics and Protestants, which when there wasn't open warfare, was very much like a Cold War kind of situation, with both sides sending secret agents into each other's country to spread propaganda and recruit agents. So, besides the fascination with Marlowe himself and with Dee, there's always the kind of perpetual fascination of power, of evil, of the supernatural that we find in modern horror movies, in certain genres of music, and so on and so forth. That Marlowe is pushing those buttons. He's provoking his audience. He is in some ways, I think, by showing a sorcerer performing a ritual on stage in order to summon a demon, and then a demon shows up on the Elizabethan stage in costume and full fright makeup, like he's a member of KISS or something like that. This is meant to shock the audience. This is in some respects a horror show. it is also a tragedy. It is the tragedy of Dr. Faustus, his rise and fall. So that's another way to think about it too. But I just wanted to give you a few kind of general facts, contexts, and overview in this lecture before I plunged into looking at two specific passages. The first will be in very early in the play too. The first will be in Act 1, where Faustus is deliberating on his course of action, and the second is on Act 2, in which Faustus will discuss hell with Mephastophilis after he has taken, after he has made the contract, and Mephastophilis says, all knowledge is yours now. So let's have a look at Act 1, Scene 1, lines 107 to 153. From what we have learned so far, Faustus, he's just the hotness. He's the best scholar at Wittenberg, which, by the way, is the sort of the birthplace of the Reformation, where Martin Luther taught and famously posted his theses on the door of the cathedral. And Dr. Faustus has studied theology, among other things. Philosophy, he says, is odious, hateful, and obscure. Both law and physic, that is medicine, are for petty wits. That's for small intelligences. Divinity, which is to say theology, which used to be considered the highest of all subjects. Everything else was secondary to theology when we lived in a less secular society. Divinity is the basest of the three, unpleasant, harsh, contemptible, and vile. This is Faustus talking here. 'Tis magic that hath ravished me. Then, gentle friends, aid me in this attempt, and I that have with concise syllogisms, that is, logical formulas, gravelled the pastors of the German church. That is, I've turned them into gravel, and made the flowering pride of Wittenberg swarm to my problems, as the infernal spirits on sweet Musaeus when he came to hell will be as cunning as Agrippa was, whose shadow made all Europe honor him. Valdez, who's this shady scholar that Faustus knows, says, Faustus, these books, thy wit and our experience, shall make all nations canonize us. That is, they will make us saints, which is kind of ironic. As Indian Moors obey their Spanish lords. Now, historical context here, this is the 1590s, and this is when the Spanish Empire is at its height. It rules much of the New World. Indian Moors, of course, refers to the indigenous peoples of the Americas. And he's comparing the power that will be gained from magic to that which the Spanish and other European powers have gained through imperialism, which I find really interesting. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. As Indian Moors obey their Spanish lords, so shall the subjects of every element be always serviceable to us three. We will have power over nature. Now, the thing about magic is that in every form, in every depiction in which you encounter it, whether it's suspicious and evil, or whether it's like friendly and happy and you make your car fly and your pictures talk to you or whatever, the essential quality of magic is that it's always something for nothing. It's always your will is translated into reality without the input of energy or work. And there's a sense, I think, that the energy, that the power that was unleashed by imperialism had that kind of effect on European culture. That Spain had so much gold all of a sudden after a few decades of plundering the New World, that they didn't even know what to do with it, and they gilded the Vatican, and Spain bought half of Italy, basically, and they had and they controlled the Netherlands. They had an enormous amount of power, and so that there was a fascination in this power too that seemed to be coming from some other dimension. So this is the comparison that Valdez makes. Interestingly, a Spanish-sounding name. And of course, Spain at this time is also the enemy of England. Protestant England is in a kind of ongoing Cold War with the Spanish. The Spanish tried to invade England in, I think, 1587, the famous Spanish Armada that is ruined in a storm, which English patriots refer to as the Protestant wind. Anyway, the elements shall be serviceable to us three. That is, they will serve us. Like lions shall they guard us when we please, like Almain rutters with their horsemen's staves, or Lapland giants trotting by our sides. Sometimes like women, or unwedded maids shadowing more beauty in their airy brows than has the white breasts of the Queen of Love from Venice. Shall they drag huge argosies, that is, trading ships, again speaking to this context of a globalizing, imperializing Europe. And from America, the golden fleece that yearly stuffs old Philip's treasury, that's the King of Spain. And again, America refers to all of the Americas, this being several centuries before the establishment of the United States, and actually a decade and a half even before the establishment of Virginia. Faustus likes what he hears. Valdez, as resolute am I in this as thou to live, therefore object it not. Cornelius, another scholar, says, the miracles that magic will perform will make thee vow to study nothing else. He that is grounded in astrology, enriched with tongues, well seen in minerals, hath all the principles magic doth require. Then doubt not, Faustus, but to be renowned and more frequented for this mystery sought out than heretofore the Delphian oracle. People are going to be so interested in you, you're going to be so popular, they're going to seek you out like in ancient times they sought out the Delphian oracle. Kind of an anti-Christian humanism here, where where classical references are used to actually tell satanic truths. But of course, the thing is that, as we learned from Milton already, that the whole system of devils and Satan and hell and all that is contained within, the Christian worldview, right? It's kind of a bizarre trick that Faustus is trying to pull off, as we'll see, to have the power that's granted by supernatural satanic forces, but deny the larger metaphysical context of all that. And this speaks to Faustus's attempt to break the limits that are imposed on him. The spirits tell me they can dry the sea and fetch the treasure of all foreign wracks. Aye, all the wealth that our forefathers hid within the massy entrails of the earth. Heavy, massive. Then that's not part of the poem. Then tell me, Faustus, what shall we three want? Nothing, Cornelius. Oh, this cheers my soul. That means we shall lack for nothing. We shall have everything. Come, show me some demonstrations magical, that I may conjure in some lusty grove, and have these joys in full possession. It's funny that he leaves off on joys here, because one thing we're going to find is that when Faustus gets what he wants, the one thing that he will not have is joy. There was a philosopher of history from the early 20th century named Oswald Spengler. Used the term Faustian to describe Western civilization, the civilization that produced three-point perspective and calculus and the polyphonic music of Baroque and double-entry bookkeeping that crossed the ocean and explored other countries. And he said that this civilization is essentially founded on this idea, not founded on this idea, but is characterized by this impulse to not respect limits, to try to break the rules, to try to sort of go beyond the borders that have been that seem to have been imposed, and that this has taken us all the way to flight, for example, and to breaking the atom, and that there's this. But this, I mean, this idea entails the notion that we are, as Joni Mitchell puts it in the song Woodstock, caught in a devil's bargain. So this is a bit of an aside, but this idea of Faust as somebody who is not content within the conventional limits, but who seeks for more, is a idea that makes him later on to be a kind of hero. In the late 1700s and the early 1800s, the early 1800s, the German poet Johann Wolfgang Goethe will rewrite Faustus, where Faustus gets saved at the end. And for a romantic like Goethe, and I'm using romantic in the intellectual and aesthetic historical sense. I mean romantic in terms of like romanticism, these ideas about, the imagination and individuality, not romanticism as in like, Jude Devereux novels or Lifetime movies or, the Hallmark. Look it up. But Goethe, as a romantic hero, Goethe rewrites Faustus as a romantic hero. But the Faust of I don't know if Marlowe's Faustus is there yet. Let's look at the next passage that I am pulling up for us to read together. And one of the things that I'm doing here by bringing up these passages for us to read together, by the way, is attempting to model the kind of work that I want you to do on your analyses and really focus on a particular passage to see how the text more widely or is reflected in that passage and what we can bring out of it. Let's look at Act 2, Scene 1, lines 112 to 150, where Faustus is talking to the devil Mephastophilis. At this point, Faustus has made his deal with Mephastophilis. Now, how this deal works is pretty interesting. I think there's some interesting questions to be asked there. Whether the ritual actually has any power. Whether it ever has any power. Because one of the things that's going to happen in this play is that later on, Faustus is going to regret what he does, and Mephastophilis is going to say, no, too late, a deal's a deal. And Faustus is going to say, oh, I guess it is, right? Which is, in a sense, committing the sin of despair, because he's despairing of God's power over any kind of flimflammery that a devil can come up with, right? God would surely have the power to save anybody who is believes that he can be saved and repents of his sins according to Christian theology, unless he is deceived by these diabolical lies. And so this is one of the kind of tragic tensions within Faustus, which really comes to a conclusion at the end when he talks about the clocks moving ever forward, delivering him towards the time of his death and the expiration of his contract. Clocks, mechanical clocks being a relatively new invention at the time, I think that's a really striking image as well. But here, back at the beginning of Faustus's, career as a sorcerer, he's just signed the contract, and I'd like you to compare it. Just go back to Act 1, Scene 3, line 46 to 54, where Faustus has done this ritual where he has said the name of God backwards and all these things, and poof, Mephastophilis appears, and Faustus is like, it worked, I have magical power, and Mephastophilis is like, well, we just heard you blaspheme God's name, and whenever we hear that, we hell people are like, yep, I think we got a likely prospect there, so I guess you could say it worked, and he's like, yes, it worked, my magic totally worked. And one of the, I think, humorous subthreads or humorous threads in Faustus is the way that Mephastophilis lies by telling the truth. He often tells Faustus the exact unflattering, harsh truth and lets Faustus lie to himself. And the passage that I pulled up here is a very good example of this. So now, Faustus, ask me what thou wilt. He say, you've got all this power now, all the knowledge in the world, anything you want. Faustus says, first will I question with thee about hell. Tell me, where is the place that men call hell? Under the heavens. Aye, so are all things else, but whereabouts? Within the bowels of these elements where we are tortured and remain forever. Hell hath no limits, nor is circumscribed in one self place. But where we are is hell, and where hell is, there must we ever be. And to be short, when all the world dissolves and every creature shall be purified, all places shall be hell, that is not heaven. Faustus hears all this, told to him by a devil that he summoned from hell, and says, Oh, come, I think hell's a fable. I think so still, till experience change thy mind. Why, thinkest thou then that Faustus shall be damned? Aye, of necessity, for here's the scroll wherein thou hast given thy soul to Lucifer. Aye, and body too, but what of that? Thinkest thou that Faustus is so fond to imagine that after this life there is any pain? Tush! These are trifles and mere old wives' tales. But I am an instance to prove the contrary. For I tell thee I am damned, and now in hell. Nay, an this be hell, I'd willingly be damned. What, sleeping, eating, walking, and disputing? Believing this, let me have a wife, the fairest maid in Germany, for I am wanton and lascivious, and cannot live without a wife. Interesting. So first he's like, tell me about hell. Okay, I'll tell you all about hell. That's cool. I don't believe in hell. I think it's fake. All right, sure. Okay. But now Faustus wants, what does he want? A wife. Let me have the fairest maid in Germany. And here we learn some of the limits of the supposed power of Mephastophilis and the magic that comes with this hellish sorcery. Mephastophilis says, How a wife? I prithee, Faustus, talk not of a wife. Nay, sweet Mephastophilis, fetch me one, for I will have one. Thou wilt have one. Sit there till I come. I'll fetch thee a wife in the devil's name. Enter a devil, dressed like a woman, with fireworks. This must have killed them in the early 16th century, right? He's like, bring me a wife, and the, Gene Simmons, Mephastophilis is like, and then this clown comes in. A devil would have been dressed like a clown. We would have had basically like a male actor in women's clothes, in clown makeup, setting off fireworks, and this. I imagine that at this moment, for the early modern audience, this would have been a really hilarious kind of thing, but hilarious in the way that of tension being released. You know how if you're watching like a really tense, scary movie, sometimes they'll switch to something funny and lighthearted to kind of sort of ease things up. And Mephistophilis says, Tell Faustus, how dost thou like thy wife? A plague on her for a hot whore. Exit the devil. Maybe he's like runs and kicks her or something. I don't know. I like to stage plays in my mind when I read them. But here's the important thing, and here's where we realize we encounter the limits of the power of the devil. Tut, Faustus. Marriage is but a ceremonial toy. If thou lovest me, think no more of it. Now, Mephistophilis cannot produce a wife because in Christian belief, marriage is a sacrament, right? Marriage is holy. And devils cannot do something which is holy. Anything that they would try to do that would be like a wife would be a parody of it, would be a fake. And this is why he says that it itself is not real. It's a ceremonial toy. It's just a meaningless thing. And so don't think about it. I'll call thee out the fairest courtesans, and bring them every morning to thy bed. She whom thine eyes shall like, thy heart shall have. Be she as chaste as was Penelope, or wise as Saba, or as beautiful as was bright Lucifer before his fall. Mephistophilis can be a good speaker when he wants. I could go into a lot more passages in Dr. Faustus. It's a really interesting play, and I think it's a sad play, because of the way that Faustus degenerates, and in a certain sense, he does it to himself. For all the greater his power, the more limited his imagination gets. At first he's like, I'm going to fly across the world and conquer everything and dig up all the money and have the most beautiful wife. And then he's like playing pranks on people. And at the end, when he's alone and he feels like he's hurtling towards the end of his contract and his death, and he has nobody around him, he asks Mephastophilis to summon him an image of Helen of Troy. And this is where he gives that famous speech, is this the face that launched 1,000 ships? But what he's essentially looking at, again, is just an illusion. Like a devil simulating the image of his own desire back to him. He's in this state of, you might call it like a hedonistic depression, right? This is essentially a pornographic image in the sense that it is summoned to stimulate his desire, and he's just kind of in this distracted, he just wants to distract himself from the inevitability of his own doom. And his own despair. Faustus's offense can never be pardoned. The serpent that tempted Eve may be saved, but not Faustus. And, maybe this is Faustus's pride. Oh, I'm the most special bad boy that ever existed. But, I don't know. I look forward to talking with you in the discussion board about this text. I'm sorry that this lecture went on for so long. Perhaps I'll break it up into two. Have a great day. And yeah, thank you for joining me. I hope you're enjoying our reading together. Bye.